Thanks very much, Rennie. It's wonderful to be here. I lost count of the number of IGFs that I've spoken at now because I've been in this job for such a long time. It's good as well to be in this room. Last time I was here, I was launching my review of architecture policy with the eminent architect Sir Terry Farrell. So I just want to show you the breadth of responsibilities that this talented minister is able to cover, from the future of the built environment in the UK through to global governance of the worldwide interweb. So it's a pleasure to be here, and no doubt you will have discussed a lot of what happened last week. We were lucky to host, I think, ICANN 50, the 50th ICANN meeting, because it was in London, which is a truly global city, not because of me, I hasten to add. ICANN 50 attracted the largest number of participants of any ICANN meeting that's happened. Something like almost 3,500 people came to London. But I think it also underlined the UK's key role in the multi-stakeholder debate on internet governance. And of course, as everyone in this room knows, that meeting of ICANN was a very timely meeting. ICANN's primary role and accountability as the global coordinator for the Internet's domain name system is under focus at the moment. The US government is undertaking the long-awaited final stage of privatization, if you like, of the domain name system. I'm not sure privatization is necessarily the right word. The transition, rather, of the stewardship of the IANA function relating to the management of the root zone of the system away from government oversight to proper oversight of the global community. Governments obviously need to contribute to those discussions that are going to lead to the process of transition and implementation of the new global IANA model. And this was, of course, one of the critical issues which was discussed at the high-level governmental meeting, which I chaired on the opening day. We also did a first take on the report of the ICANN panel on global internet cooperation and governance mechanisms, one of the most elegant titles of a panel you could come across, chaired by the Estonian President, Thomas Ilves, and also Vint Cerf. And this is looking at how we can make a decentralized internet governance ecosystem more collaborative and responsive to individual problems, for example, in developing country economies which lack the necessary capacity and expertise. And we, again, in government, have a key role here, working with the ICANN community of stakeholders to help that process. Finally, of course, the high-level meeting was also an opportunity for ministers and senior officials to take stock of the Net Mondial meeting in Sao Paulo in April and look in particular at how to implement the roadmap and action on specific issues identified in the principal outcome, the Net Mondial multi-stakeholder statement. The roadmap may have started in Sao Paulo, but it led to London. Especially, it's important, I think, to take account of what was said there, because it's relevant to our meeting today. We may not have achieved everything we wanted in Sao Paulo. One key conclusion we strongly support and must do our bit to deliver on, though, is improving the existing internet governance framework and strengthening and evolving the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance. That model includes not only the global IGF, but also the regional IGFs and, of course, national IGFs like this one. UK IGF was the first national IGF. It has been the linchpin. It is, in answer to Rennie's heads-up, as it were, the most visible manifestation of the multi-stakeholder model in practice in the UK. So if one is thinking about practical things that the IGF in the UK has come up with, simply existing is a practical thing by demonstrating that government participates in discussions on internet governance with a much wider community. And in that regard, I have to pay tribute to Rennie and nominate for all the hard work in supporting and organising UK IGF events like the one we're having today. This is all a very fast-moving space. Net Mondial rightly said that there is a need to develop multi-stakeholder mechanisms at the national level because many issues do need to be tackled at the national level. And also, internet governance processes, mechanisms and institutions need to form stronger linkages. And I support this outlook for the successful evolution of the multi-stakeholder model. I do see great potential for more tangible outcomes from the upcoming global IGF in Istanbul, feeding out for action or further development to the regional and national IGFs, or depending on the issue, to the Internet Engineering Task Force, the Internet Society, ICANN, or frankly whatever institution is the most appropriate for the issue or problem in question. We can also envisage issues or problems coming back to the agenda of the following IGF in Brazil next year, not simply for a revisit or update, but crucially, the issue will have moved on. So perhaps we'll be looking at options for solutions through some kind of distributed intersessional activity with the IGF providing the coordination. So I offer this as food for thought for today, as the UK IGF continues to build on its long history of success and effective practice in preparation for the next global IGF. Should we develop a stronger linkage to the IGF on specific issues and outcomes, and in that way contribute to the intersessional activity that will ultimately produce concrete results? I hope you have a successful meeting today. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on how UK IGF can contribute to implementing the Net Mondial outcomes. I hope to see many of you at the IGF in Istanbul in September. You've already heard from Sarah Taylor on the panel, and I think I can short-circuit the answer to most of your questions by saying, I agree with Sarah. Thank you very much. Yes. Happy is not a word I would use. I'm prepared to take questions. Good. I'm glad I covered everything. Oh, no.
Richard Cox from the Spam House Project, and obviously concerned with net governance worldwide and net transparency, we come down to the issue of dealing with things when they go wrong, which is something we have to do quite a lot. In the UK, in recent years, we've seen money laundering regulations come in. The banks are required to know their customer. Now, car drivers have to know where the car is and who's driving it. I'm wondering whether we need something similar on the internet, not to break down any confidentiality or privacy, which of course is so important, but to ensure that information, when it's needed, is there, and that those looking in to find some of the badness on the internet, which we all have to do from time to time, we don't find a whole load of bogus information that the person holding it knew was bogus. And I'm just suggesting there should be some level of responsibility there. Snowden obviously will cause a lot of people to try and hide more than they used to, and perhaps we need to establish a standard so that when people do start distributing child abuse images, which of course we all agree, I think, absolutely horrendous, when that happens and when other things happen which are almost as bad, like the Trojan that locks a computer until you pay a ransom, we can actually do something about it if the chain is there when it's appropriate to ask.
Well, that's a very, very big question in terms of, if you like, identity assurance on the internet. And I clearly, if you go back to first principles, something that we say as a government all the time is just because if something is a crime offline, it's a crime online. You use the particular example of the vile trade in child abuse images. I don't think anyone would question for a minute the police's right to do everything they can to try and track down an individual who is distributing those images, who by definition will presumably also be going to great lengths to hide their identity. So we need to give the police the powers to do that, balanced against, obviously, the citizens' desire for privacy. And it's a very, very live debate. I don't think we debate it in terms of child abuse, but we debate it in other areas. Certainly, for example, protecting kids from adult content, which is, again, something I'm strongly in favour of. We want to see more identity assurance to ensure that people accessing adult sites are indeed adults and not children. And clearly there's debates on about the social media, about ensuring age verification as well for people using social media sites. I think, in essence, it would be difficult to kind of come up with an all-encompassing principle on identity assurance. But I do think as I say, that it's important that in specific instances we recognise that it's important potentially to find out the identity of people. But at the same time, a lot of people want to use the internet relatively anonymously. That's their freedom to do so, and it's up to the individual sites, whether it's a newspaper site accepting comments or Twitter or whatever, on what they do in terms of identity assurance.
Minister Jean. Yeah, Jean-Jacques Sall from ICANN. Not a question, just a thank you, really, from ICANN, but also from the many people I spoke to during the week who wanted to thank the UK for hosting the event, and also you and the team at DCMS, in particular, for organising the high-level government meeting. This was not just ICANN's 50th meeting, it was by far the largest. We had close to 4,000 registered participants at the end, more than 3,000 actually turned up, and we had people really from all over the world taking part. Every corner of the world was in London last week. And I think, just generally thank you, and look forward to the next one, but this was a really important step. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. It was a great meeting, I thought, and I thought most people came with a spirit of openness, willing to discuss the issues. It felt like a very open meeting, and people were quite enthusiastic to be there.
Chris Marsden, University of Sussex, the aforementioned. But it's a personal question, it's not a question that's anything to do with the university. And I'm asking a net neutrality question because Jean-Jacques can't anymore, of course. So the question is this. Obviously, there's a division in Europe on net neutrality, and no doubt when you go to council, you're familiar with the massed ranks of the division against you. But the question is there any point in the UK IGF trying to take a position on net neutrality when clearly there are lots of divided opinions, and maybe the response it should be the net mundial response, which is take it off the table and not discuss it at all? I ask because there's obviously a dynamic coalition on net neutrality at the IGF, which started last year. So the discussion does come up, but maybe it's just not something in which it's sensible to have any corporate position given the amount of disagreement in the room about it.
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I mean, I'm not totally alive to the level of disagreement within the UK IGF, but certainly I do think it would be good to hear the UK IGF opine on various internet-related issues. I think that would raise your profile, and if it's impossible to get it, as it were, a corporate view from the UK IGF, certainly a review of the issues, and indeed highlighting where there is disagreement is, I think, a perfectly valid thing for the UK IGF to say, that this is an issue that was discussed and most people coalesced around point A and B, but there was no agreement on point C or D. I think is a perfectly valid way of putting forward your point of view. I don't think people would deride the UK IGF for that. As you know, my view on net neutrality is pretty straightforward, I think, which is that we don't want people to block web traffic on anti-competitive grounds. And when people are offering internet access, that should mean what it says, that you should be getting the internet access that you're promised to all legal sites at the speed that you're promised it at, but at the same time we want to leave room for innovation. And that's why we came up with a code of conduct, which may well be worth revisiting in terms of the number of people who have signed up to it, and seeing whether we can get more unanimity around it. We've got pretty good unanimity around it at the moment, but I think that gives us the flexibility. And my watchword in all these areas has been to try, I wouldn't say avoid legislation, but I think if we can get codes of conduct, voluntary agreements, we build into those, we not only make progress on key issues, but we also build in an element of flexibility that allows us to revisit these issues relatively quickly should the need arise, in order to address, bumps in the road, if you like. Yes. But apart from that, I agree with Sarah.
Thank you. Minister Khaled Fattal, Multilingual Internet Group. I want to interject the first comment from the gentleman in the green shirt over there about the issue of child protection. And to start with, allow me to just reconcile some facts that are going on today and where there's little advancement on them. The new internet ecosystem we're moving into today is moving from 22 GTLDs to 1,000 plus. We're going to have 100 plus new GTLDs in IDNs, which we label as the birth of the multilingual internet. We also have a shift in the user base from west to east. Half of the internet today is in Asia. 2/3 of the users by end of 2014 will be in emerging markets. Going back to the issue of where the risks are, reconcile this with what's happening in terms of jurisdictional cooperation. I mean, allow me to be to shock and awe, and I'm sure you're big-hearted to receive it. It's 19th century. So we already recognize that there's going to be a huge challenge in that gap. And those who want to do bad will do bad. And so far, we have not observed anybody doing something, and we've stepped up to the plate to doing this. And this is in the true sense of multi-stakeholderism, with summits and events around the globe to educate and involve different stakeholders and different sectors on how to deal with. Critical topics are cybersecurity in the new internet ecosystem. Nothing is being addressed vis-a-vis the new change. It's all being addressed in what I call the standard de facto structure. Nothing is being addressed in how to fix or address the threats on child protection online vis-a-vis this new internet ecosystem. And there are many, many critical topics. My question to you here is, and I want to see how big your heart is on this issue, what can UK government or UK IGF step up to the plate to be the same shining light that we always congratulate ourselves being the guiding principle on national IGFs, so that we can actually engage and show the world that something is positive and something is being done?
Well, I think there are two elements to your question. One is, I think that it is a challenge for the UK government and the European Commission, perhaps, I think, to look beyond our shores, particularly when we're framing legislation. So one thing I'm interested in, for example, and this is me speaking slightly out of turn because it's not my responsibility, but, you know, we're debating in Europe new data protection legislation. I think that we should be doing that in cooperation, potentially. We might disagree with the US and so on, but it seems to be an obvious opportunity to put in place a data protection regime that is fit for purpose across a wider community, if you like. Now, there may be differences that are just insurmountable, and I'm not close to how the data protection legislation was framed to know whether or not there were discussions, but that seems to be obvious stuff where legislation, effectively, that affects arguably how the internet works should be framed with global cooperation in mind. In terms of other specific issues, I mean, clearly we cooperate with our allies and others on cybersecurity issues. William Hague started the London process with cybersecurity specifically in mind, and we cooperate with the police on criminal issues just in the way we have always done in the physical world. And it is a challenge, and we are in transition in the UK and elsewhere in terms of recognising that a lot of crime has moved online, and we need the skill set in the UK to combat that, and we also need to further and deepen our cooperation, but be in no doubt that that is happening. Susie Hargreaves is here from the IWF, and I'm sure she'll confirm that the IWF, another UK, I think, beacon in terms of leading the way in terms of dealing with this terrible trade of child abuse images, has a cooperation network that spans the globe. It's an example, if you like, of the multi-stakeholder approach. It's a charity. It started from the grassroots. It's highly effective. It works closely with law enforcement, but I think it's almost potentially, arguably, more effective because of the way it was created. But I don't know if Susie wants to comment on that point.
Yes, thanks very much, Ed. I really appreciate you mentioning the IWF. The IWF is a great example of multi-stakeholderism. It's something where we get in a room with the biggest companies in the world, government, with the police, with the public, and we work really effectively. And I think it's something the UK is incredibly proud of. And I think we should really be singing from the rooftops, because we've also addressed any issues or criticisms in terms of potential human rights issues. Over the last year, we've had a clean bill of health from a report from Lord Ken MacDonald on this issue. So actually, the UK should be standing up and saying, yes, this works, and we do it really well in the UK. So
but you work across, you work with all the other charities as well across the globe.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work across internationally, nationally, and we work across civil society. We work removing child sexual abuse content can't happen unless everybody works together. It's just impossible. So without that partnership in place, and you can get the most diverse people in the room together and they'll all agree. So thanks for mentioning that. Thank you.
No. What would you like? How would you like to follow up? The man in the green shirt and green tie also wants to follow up. No, follow up. No, follow. Yeah. I never met Susie, and we've been in communication precisely about this. Did you know Susie was in the room? No, I did not. Fantastic. You're now going to make a connection. This is what the UK IGF is all about. Second by oath, the chap at the back.
Hi, I've actually got the microphone, so probably a good start.
That is 9/10 of the law, isn't it? No, possession is 9/10. Yes, right.
Something like that. Adrian Kennard from Andrews and Arnold. A comment on net neutrality. I'm very in favour of an open internet and very much against regulating what we do as an ISP, not just because we're an ISP, but because the whole way the internet works technically means that regulation can always be bypassed somehow. That just allow any communication and it will be possible for covert networks to be set up. So regulation has to be with the cooperation of the community and the technical community as well. It has to be sensible. You can't push it too far, otherwise you'll just lose any insight into what's happening and lose control. One of the comments on net neutrality, though, on topic with my panel talk later, you're talking about ISPs should allow access to all legal content. Have you considered the impact for the fact that some websites, for example, are only available on IP version 6, and therefore ISPs should be mandated almost to provide IP6 to their consumers?
Yes. I'm obviously very interested in the IPv6 issue, and 4 years ago we started down the road. We had a budget to promote IPv6, and that disappeared. And I keep being assured by everyone. Well, there was a kind of comedy Whitehall moment as the DCMS and BIS each tried to pretend that IPv6 was not their responsibility. I think DCMS managed to get out of it, and we've landed it firmly with BIS, who may be unaware that IPv6 is their responsibility. But I am assured that IPv6 is going very well, Sarah. And, but I stand ready to help, should there be a problem, to help my BIS colleague who has the responsibility for IPv6 implementation.
I don't always wear green, you know.
What do you normally wear?
Whatever's appropriate.
Well, why is green appropriate for today?
I felt it was a lovely summery day.
I agree.
Anyway, while I'm agreeing very much with what Adrian's just said, particularly about common sense, that rare commodity, I do want to challenge you on your definition of what we should provide with net neutrality. You said access to all legal sites. That, unfortunately, would include a site which has got a program on it waiting to download a Trojan to your machine and compromise it. That would include a site which is meant to look like a bank trying to steal your bank credentials. I could go on, but time is not with us. It's not black and white. It's many shades of grey. Okay, perhaps not 50, but we must realise that it's many shades of grey. We must apply that common sense, and we must allow our ISPs to apply that common sense and sometimes to be guided by people like the IWF. Although the material the IWF is guarding against is illegal material, there is a lot of legal material that can do harm, and a good ISP will protect its customers against that. Now, that, to my mind, is not inconsistent with net neutrality, but your definition of it said it was. Would you like to adjust, and would Sarah agree with you if you did?
I don't think that what you define as a legal site, I would define as a legal site. I think a site that is posing as a bank in order to steal your bank credentials is clearly an illegal site. It's a fraudster. I wouldn't elide the 2 points. dare I suggest that common sense would say that what I mean by net neutrality is simply that the customer who buys broadband at a certain speed will want to, would expect to be able to access all legitimate sites without one of them being throttled on anti-competitive grounds, and at the speed that they've contracted for. Now, if they want to access a site, if they can access a site at a faster speed because of commercial deals that have been done, I'm relatively comfortable with that. I think that, as I say, we want to leave room for innovation, but what we want to guard against is anti-competitive practices by, effectively by our ISPs, which is where I root my definition of net neutrality. Do you agree with that, Sarah?